We learned nothing yesterday. The 3 hours of me teaching was just a waste. I should feel bad about myself. Got it.
No. We went over project, the software development life cycle again, just to remind us of, the process to get some more familiarity with it, wireframing as well.
Yep, and I know some of that is boring, right? Because as an engineer, you want to just dive into the code. You want to be doing your HTML. You want to be pumping out products. But I think it's really easy to get shell shocked, right? That the hardest part of the capstone is going to be getting going on it. And I'm already seeing you guys have some great ideas in the submissions. But then you have this initial hump to get over, right? Of like, all right, great, that's awesome. How do I make that actually happen now? And so the goal of doing this class project is hopefully going to be a motivator for you to figure out like, okay, even though I am the client, I need to figure out my requirements. And whether you write them down on Post-it notes, whether you have a whiteboard and can jot them down, whether you prefer to use Trello and dump the things in there, whether it's a Google Doc that you put it in, the goal here is that you start thinking through your requirements doc. And so that will be my first piece of advice, is coming into our upcoming one-on-ones next week. If you show up and you're like, I've got this idea, I don't know where to start, I'm going to send you back to yesterday's class and I'm going to say, go through, write out the requirements. Don't think like an engineer, think like a user. What do you want your capstone to do? Bullet point all of that down, because now that is your forward momentum. Now that you've got those bullet points, now you can break it out and start saying, well, I need these different screens. And on these different screens, the user needs to be able to do these things. And then you can take that and go into your wireframes, and whether you want diagrams.net to burn in a special circle in hell, or you want to use Keynote or whatever it is, that's when you can start taking that momentum, right? Now that you've got the requirements done and your screen's kind of initial plan out, now you can go in and get those wireframes started. And from there, now you're over that week 1 hump, and it's all about using everything from week 2 up until today, week 5, the end of week 5, to start building out those HTML streams. What else did we do yesterday? Any questions? Anywhere we got stuck? Anywhere we should spend a little bit more time today?
No, I just, you started coding really fast, so I noticed that you kicked it up a little bit. So
yep.
I got to stay on point with that.
The good news is I will not be going at that speed today. We're going to slow it a little bit back down. We're going to start today on a login screen, because chances are 90% of your capstones will need a login screen. So we're going to go through, we're going to use Bootstrap today. We're going to get the login done, and we're going to code out the dashboard. I will be going slow enough so that you can code along today. I will be going slow enough so that when you get stuck somewhere, you can ask about it. With that said, you don't have to feel like you need to follow along today. If you are someone who you're like, I'm in a good groove, I'm someone who does better going back, looking at the recording, that is completely fine. This is not going to be a turned in assignment that you have to do at the end of the week, right? The whole point of the project week is that it is a catch-up week. It is all about solidifying the concepts. We're going a million miles an hour weeks 1 through 4. Week 5 is the chance to catch up and make sure all of that is sinking in. And that is the point of all the project weeks throughout the curriculum, right? Is that we're not really learning anything new. We're just practicing on those projects and getting the exposure to them. So if you want to code along with me, that's great. If you would like to code along with me for part of the time, all of this code, I'm going to have starter files for you so that you can just click on them, download them, and start wherever you're at. If you get halfway through it and you're like, I'm done today, it's Thursday, made it to the end of the week, I'm just along for the ride, that is fine. The only thing I will say is when you're along for the ride, you have to stop when you're not getting the concepts, right? So when you're like, I don't know why he's doing that, I'm bored out of my mind, I tuned out 15 minutes ago, jump in and say, you're boring me, Max, I'm falling asleep over here, it's Thursday, spice it up. I go back, why are you doing that? Where's your HTML? You're going too fast, whatever it is, give me that feedback, give me that pacing information. because trust me, I can make this app on my own. I'm not making this app just so I have the app. I'm making the app to make sure that you guys are getting the practice on it. So feel free to jump in, interrupt me, let me know how things are going, or if you need me to slow down, or if you have any questions about the concepts.
Got it.
With that said, we do have 5 p.m. on Sunday taking the lead. So I am going to say that it is office hours are going to be 5 p.m. on Sunday. Let me just sign it into my Calendly and make that official. Scheduled events, pending office hours, 5 p.m. on Sunday, book meeting. Okay, that is scheduled. Office hours are 5 p.m. on Sunday. Let me cross this out and add in Sunday at 5 p.m. Okay, that takes care of that. We already did stand up. One thing I want to show you guys before we dive into the project is how to do a domain name search, right? So hopefully you guys are starting to kick around your project ideas. You may not have one yet. That's okay. You've got a whole week to kind of dwell on it. If you want to schedule a one-on-one and talk through your project idea, that's fine. I also will get back to you on the homework assignment from yesterday, A26, on reviewing the capstone doc and replying to your comments in there. So I don't feel like that feedback went into the abyss. I will respond to those comments coming up. With that said, you may be starting to think about a domain name search. So for homework for this weekend, A27 is submit a name for our feedback app, right? We can't just call it feedback app because we're never going to get feedback.com. But what you want to start doing is thinking about 2 domain names. One, a domain name for your project. Well, really 3. A domain name for your project. What are you going to call your project? How is someone going to get to it? You want to think about your personal domain name. If you can get maxmatthews.com, you should get firstname.lastname.com, right? That is going to be your best bet. But you may find that's not available. So you may want to search for a .dev domain name or some other one. And then the third one you're thinking of is come up with a creative name for our feedback app. And it certainly does not have to have feedback in it. If you want to have some unique critic.com spelling, that is totally fine. But in order to search for domain names, I'm going to go to domains.google.com. Caitlin, if you can add that link to the outline, I think I forgot to do that. Google Domains has a great name search. If you are not signed into Google or don't have domains with them, you'll probably get a search for your new domain here. If for whatever reason you're already signed in or you already have this screen, you can click on get a new domain name over here on the side. And that's going to pop open just an open search box. And in here, you don't have to type in your name. You could just type in an idea, right? So I'm going to search for feedback, and feedback is going to tell me I could get feedfeedback.com or I could get feedback.boasts. Okay, none of those are really great, but they do touch on something of this. They call it a TLD, a top level domain. And your top level domains are probably going to be the ones that you've heard of, right? Your .com, your .net, .info, all of those. Well, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was this big new wave in domains where they opened up all of these other top level domains, and they call them generic top level domains. So you'll see GTLD, and that means things like .app are now available, .party, .autos. Your .org is going to be your standard top level domain, part of kind of the initial, 20 of them that were available. But now there are all kinds of interesting ones like .homes. So whatever you decide, a .app domain may actually be great for your project because there aren't a ton of people who have taken those on. But something like feedback.app, if I do a search for that, it's probably not going to be available, right? That's already registered. So that's part of your homework assignment is not only go into Google Domains or really any domain website. If you really want to use GoDaddy, I strongly discourage GoDaddy. But if you want to search on GoDaddy or on Namecheap, do not buy the domain. I am certainly not asking you to do that. But you can start thinking about, hey, what's a good name for my capstone? Let me see if there are some domains available. Next week, you will be buying a domain if you don't already have one for your portfolio website. So that's the other one. You want to start searching around for that. Domains, you can see in here, $14, $15 a year is the typical price that you pay for a domain. But start thinking about that for your homework assignment, searching around, seeing what you can find. You don't have to buy it yet, and certainly not for the feedback app, but just have that prep work done so that when Nathan comes in next week, he'll be able to have that. One quick comment I want to get out on homework. I will be posting the free code game homework for week 7 tomorrow. That will not be due until the end of week 7, but I do want to just mention that if you want to get a jump start on JavaScript, I will have those homework assignments posted in advance, just so you know that is coming tomorrow. Any questions on domains or the feedback project or anything that I've touched on so far? Yes, Christy.
So I'm looking at this, and it's like there's one that says like premium, and then it says $5,400 a year. Like,
yeah, what that means is someone else already bought that domain, but they are squatting on that domain, meaning that they are sitting on that and they bought it thinking someone else would pay $540 for it.
$5,400.
Well, I have seen prices all over the place. Yeah, you'll see $354 plus $26 a year. You know, you could search for certain things. I know domains have gone for over $1 million before. Tesla is the most recent one that I can think of, where someone else owned Tesla.com, and it was like a fan site for you know, the original Tesla. And eventually he sold it to Tesla, the car company. So now finally, when you go to Tesla.com, it takes you to Tesla Motors, not to this fan site. So yeah, you definitely need to shop around and figure out what you want it to be. And sometimes you may have to get creative, right? So you may not be able to get christiesbikeroutes.com, but you could get christie.bikes. So you may need to get creative there. And same for the feedback app, right? This, like I said, it does not have to have feedback in the name. So you may call this, you know, critique.app, and that actually might be available. Let's see. So
it needs to be something to do. So if I wanted to do the bikes, my domain name has to do with the bikes and not.
So you're probably going to want 2 domain names. You're going to want one for your personal portfolio site and a second one for your capstone project. Neither of them are technically required, but I would strongly encourage that you buy yourname.com or yourname.dev or something along those lines. If you've got some username that you use that's kind of on the professional side, you can do that. If you have a business name that you've had in the back of your mind for a while, or actually have an LLC, you can go down that route. But basically, the very strong recommendation of Careers in Code is to buy a domain name to host your personal website. And then it is also encouraged to come up with another domain name for your capstone project, although that is less of a requirement.
Okay.
I just want to say that it sucks that my last name isn't very common, but it is. Every dot, broadx, dot this, dot any is already taken. So I guess I'm having to come up with something, but not something that's not my name. So.
Yep. And you can get creative there. My company name is Zane, Zane Tech LLC. So I have got Zane.tech instead of zanetech.com or something like that. You know, you can get creative there. Obviously I couldn't get maxmatthews.com. So that's why my website is maxmatthew.ws. No, I don't live in the Western Samoa, but WS is the end of my last name. And so I was able to get that domain. So, you may need to get creative there, but search around, have an idea for it. You don't need to buy it today. If you search for it today, it does not mean it's likely to be gone in a couple days, but Nathan is going to walk you through that process of buying the domain and then how to link the domain to your hosting. So the website is actually available, and he's going to go through hosting and how to deploy it and all of that stuff. So this time next week, you'll actually be able to have a website that you can send your friends to and say like, hey, go check out maxmatthews.com or whatever domain you end up buying, and it should all flow from there.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So each domain can only host one.
It can. However, you can use subdomains. So once you get like my website's maxmatthews.ws, and that can only hold one website. However, you can do subdomains, and subdomains are free. So for example, I had portfolio.maxmatthews, and when you go to that loads in the portfolio page we did for class. So that is another option if you want to just host your capstone on a subdomain. Subdomains are free once you buy your main domain. So if you wanted to do, Christy, I'm picking on you here only because I know what your capstone is headed towards. But if you wanted to do bikes.christyharlow.com, you could do that, and then you wouldn't have to buy 2 domain names. You could just make it a subdomain name. Very good question. You also can do like Max Matthews / different projects in different folders, but subdomains tend to be easier to separate out different projects and different hosting types.
So if you so now that I've looked, now I see my name, now I want to buy it because I feel like it's not going to be there.
So you don't need to panic. If you would like to buy it, you can. The 3 places I recommend buying a domain name are Namecheap, Google Domains, and Cloudflare. I will put all 3 of those in my list.
.org makes it seem
I
like
have a
you're an
question.
organization.
Google Domains is going to be my top pick. Namecheap is another one, and then Cloud.
You can't do those kinds of, yeah.
Yeah, and you may get down that path of, oh, let me see if I can get the .org, and then you'll go down it and they'll say, please submit proof of your like nonprofit status. And you're like, oh, never mind, I can't actually get that. So lots of options there. And if you want to buy it, you totally can. And that's fine to use your stipend on if you've got any money left in that budget. But don't worry, it will probably still be there in 72 hours. So you can get it later. Okay, any other questions on that before we dive back into our site?
Yeah, so so the one portfolio site we'll have for years, that'll be the one that we'll be building off of, like, for years for now for that portfolio site. And if we make another one, would I be like after this, would I be able to use that like my blog or anything like that I decide to do?
Absolutely, yeah. So you're buying the domain name all on your own, as long as you keep paying the yearly fee, the $12 or the $14. That domain name is yours to own. That is not Careers in Code owned. The other thing I will throw out is if you look in the GitHub student pack, there are actually a couple of free domain names that you can get in there, but they're limited to like the dot something. So you might be able to get like a .tech for free for a year through that GitHub student pack. So definitely take a look down that path. The other thing I will say is if you are using your stipend funds for this, and want to hold on to the domain name after the program, which I encourage you to do, make sure that after a year, you switch out the credit card or the debit card to your own personal one, right? Because a year from now, that domain name is going to review. And if there's not any money left on your stipend debit card, you would lose that domain name. So that is a good point to add.
Okay, and then one last thing is is there a way to combine them? Like if I wanted to keep them all in one spot, so would I have to go through all the Google domain? Because I have one for GoDaddy already, and I just kind of want to link them all together, like have one email or something, so I don't have to like search all over for the place for them.
Good question. Yes, you can transfer them. So when in Google Domains, if you go to this transfer section and type in the domain that you want, there is a process where where GoDaddy will send you a code. It's called an EPP code. I am blanking off the top of my head what that stands for. But basically, GoDaddy is going to send you a code in your email. And you click on like, yes, I agree to transfer this domain. Then you take that information and paste it into Google Domains. And that will kick off the transfer process. It takes up to, I want to say like 3 days to up to a week to transfer over, and then it will come over. The transfer process from registrar to registrar is a little different, but it's a lot like your phone number, right? There are now regulations saying that like Verizon can't hold on to your phone number forever. If you want to transfer your phone number legally, you need to be able to do it. Same thing goes for domains. So if you get stuck at any point in that process, that is an excellent use of one-on-one times. And not only because I hate GoDaddy with a deep passion. So if you need any help getting domains anywhere, especially GoDaddy, off into one central place, I can definitely help you with that during one-on-ones.
Yeah, because that was my problem. I couldn't understand it, and they just kept taking my money. So I'm like, I need to figure this out. But thank you so much for that. That did help a lot.
GoDaddy and one-on-one, which is now called Ionos, are the two companies I hate with a passion. There are a lot of other ones out there like HostGator. Green Geeks is one of my personal hosting favorites. You guys are going to get into all of that next week. And I promise you, Nathan is going to have a lot different opinions than mine, and that's completely fine. I will add a note to touch base with him and strongly encourage him to use Google domains. I don't get any kickback or commission or anything. I just really like Google. But I will touch base with him on that. If you want to buy them, that's fine. If you want to get the transfer process started, that's also completely fine. Zach, great question. I hate GoDaddy because their customer service is awful, and they are the biggest name out there. And because of that, their standard of service is so low because they have so many customers. So they are known for having terrible downtime. So you'll go to your website and all of a sudden your website isn't loading and they're like, oh, sorry, like we just put too many customers on your server and one customer went over a limit and broke something. So we'll get around to fixing it. Your site may be down for like 4 or 6 hours. And you're like, well, I've got an interview today. Someone's going to like go on my site and look for a resume. And they're like, well, we'll get around to fixing it after you're on hold for 20 minutes. And then they transfer you to another department just to get the information that they broke it. So hosting is one of those things that's very fickle. It's very hard to get it right. And once you get it right, you want it to just work. And I think GoDaddy is just terrible with customer service and the level of service that they provide. So that's my personal hatred towards them. Next week, you will be using GitHub Pages, which is a free way to host your HTML site. That is how I have the portfolio website set up. And Nathan is going to go through linking whatever domain name you buy to that hosting. So you've got a starting place. And then when Nathan comes back about 3/4 of the way through the program for DevOps Part 2, he's going to talk through full stack hosting and different types there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to spoil anything there. So you'll be getting into that next week. Just want to plant the seed for search around for your domain names, get an idea of what you want your personal one to be, get an idea if you want to buy one for your capstone project, see if those are available, and then next week that will make more sense. Any other questions before we dive back into our feedback app?
So what about where it says, like, get a custom email with workspace? So then it's like the domain, it says you at your domain name.com.
That's going to be an additional fee from Google. And if you are planning on using that as a primary email account, it's probably not a terrible idea. But Nathan is going to go through a free way to set up your domain. So it will automatically forward emails from like contact@maxmatthews to a Gmail account you may already have. So there's a free way that you can use your custom domain and send it to an existing email address. But I don't want to say the Google email hosting is bad. I think it's just $5 or $6 a month. So it gets a little pricey just for email.
It's the same. It looks like it's the same. The one that I saw, it was the same for the year. It was the same $12 for the year. For what I saw.
I'm not sure on that. Let's just do one that I can get. I believe the email might be a little bit more than that, but I can't say for sure. Yeah, custom email, $12 a user a month.
Oh yeah, okay. I saw the $12. And yeah, no, thank you. Okay, yeah.
If you go down to the business, if you go down to the business starter, it's $6 a user a month. So that's the price I was thinking of. But Nathan is going to go through a free way of getting your emails so you can use it without having a separate inbox.
Okay, that's fine. I got my name.
Awesome. Any other questions before we dive back into project work? Okie doke. So we are going to dive into my code. I'm in week 5. I'm going to duplicate this for day 4. No, well, I didn't mean to do that. Right click, duplicate, rename that as day 4. And then just give me 1 second. I'm going to upload this to Google Drive so you guys have a starter. If you want to just leap over what we did yesterday and start over where we left off, I'm going to.
Quick question, Max.
Yep.
Is it okay to kind of watch you and then catch up? I just didn't want to okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, this is not a homework assignment. This is not something that you need to turn in. So if you are checked out for the week and all you want to do is go along for the ride and ask questions as we go along, that's completely fine. If you want to take my code and copy and paste 90% of it on this project, that is completely fine, only because you're not turning it in. So this is the class project is meant to be a review. And just making sure that the concepts as we're applying them, that they're sinking in.
Okay.
So this is one of the few times that I would say copy and paste is completely fine, or just jumping in right to the starter files. So I am going to create a link for the starter files in the outline and link that in, and I will also dump it in the Zoom chat. Not yet.
Okay.
I am dumping this in live stream for week 5, day 4 starter files. Okay, so if you would like to download those, you can. Oh, sorry. I sent that to one student in particular. I meant to send that to everyone. Okay. So I am going to share my screen and dive in to my VS Code. And I'm going to file open folder, and I am going to the day 4 folder. If you would like to just have one folder that says class project or feedback app and not break it down into individual days, that is completely fine. If you find that breaking it into individual days is going to be a good reminder of like each step that we took day by day, that's also not a bad idea. So totally up to you. I'm going to open my index.html and go live and make sure I have my info app goes here with my go to dashboard link. And then I am also going to start a live share and put that in Slack. No, that did not copy on me. Try that again. There we go. There's a link to my live share if you would like to jump into that and see me live code as I go. Any questions on project setup of how we got Bootstrap working, how we got our basic link started, how we have our 2-page set up, anything like that? Okay. So first thing I'm going to do, I think a good starter point today is going to be our login screen. And I think we can build up speed to getting our dashboard working. But right now I want to start with login. I think that will be a good refresher of using Bootstrap components and kind of working on the fly. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it login.html. I'm going to take my index.html, copy the whole thing and paste it into my login.html. And the reason I'm doing that is because I've got my Bootstrap links in here already and my link to my style sheet. So I'm just using that as kind of our starter point instead of having to do it custom every page. So I'm going to just add an H1 here that says login. And then I'm going to go back to my index.html and add another link here that says ahref, which is going to my login.html. And I'm going to say login. And then I'm going to put a line break at the end here because A tags are by default inline elements, just like span elements are. So if I didn't put this line break here, they would be smushed right next to each other. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to make sure to save my file. Okay, now my login's down here. I'm going to click on my login and I want to make sure I get to my login page. Give everyone just a minute. Actually, I'm going to kick off a poll. I know it seems crazy to do a poll this early, but that will help me know who's coding along with me, who's just going along for the ride, completely fine, whatever you choose.
Hey, I have a question, Max.
Yep.
For your line break, what did you put? You put BR?
Yep, BR, and it's a self-closing tag, so it's got the slash at the end.
Okay, so why wouldn't you use a div or?
I could. Very good question. So whenever we have a bunch of inline content, if we want to just think of it as I want to hit the enter button and have it go down to the next line, that's when I want to use my break. I want to use a div whenever I'm like, hey, I'm doing a lot of layout stuff, or I've got a bunch of content that's grouped together that I want to put a margin on, or because this is kind of just our placeholder, right? My login button is not going to be there forever. I just wanted a quick way to say, hey, on my index, I can jump between these two different pages. So I just did a line break only because it's more temporary. But if I was going to say, oh, I want to style this, I want to have my dashboard link on the left, and I want to have some colors, and I might need some padding or margin on it, that's when I would take a step back and start adding in those divs. Because this BR is going to functionally achieve the same exact thing as if we put this in a div and this in a div. So it's just a matter of, do I need that CSS hook? Do I basically need a division of my site so I can style it out that way? Or is this just a quick inline? I don't want the two links on top of each other. And in this case, that's why I did the BR.
Got it.
Great question.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
Okay, so the other Bootstrap link that you added in, what was it? The script link. Where did you get that from?
That is from the same exact site. If you go to Get Bootstrap and Get Started, if you scroll down a little bit, the CSS is the first snippet of code. The second snippet of code is this bundle.
Oh, the bundle. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
No problem. And the reason we need this bundle, I'm glad you asked the question. This is a good reminder of Bootstrap is 95% a CSS framework. But in order to get that last 5% working of the CSS framework, you need a little JavaScript. So those are little things like, hey, our menu bar is actually going to look great when we use it. But to get that little menu button to work when we click on the menu on the mobile and it pushes everything down, that won't work without our JavaScript. So if you're wondering up until this point, why haven't we been using this JavaScript? It's because we haven't needed any of the Bootstrap functionality that's using it. but the nav bar was the first thing that we needed some JavaScript in order to make it work the way Bootstrap wanted. So that's why we added in now. Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna keep on rolling here. What I'm thinking is I would like, oh yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, sorry. When I go to when I click the login, it says cannot get login.html.
Did you create login.html as a separate file?
No.
So what I did there is I just copied my whole index.html, created my login.html, and then pasted everything in. And then in the body, just put in an H1 for my login as kind of a placeholder, just to make sure it's linking into there. Okay, so what I'm thinking for my login screen, I don't have a wireframe for this, but hopefully it's pretty easy to picture. I don't want like a giant input for my form, right? I would like kind of something centered, not right up against the top, but something like maybe a little card that's holding the words login, the form field, my password, and the button that actually says login. So that's what we're going to start styling. So I'm going to take out my login text, and everything is going to go in a div class container. Because we're using Bootstrap, we probably are going to use the grid system, and so that's where I want to start. Zach, were you able to get that working?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so I'm in my.
I'm
Yep,
sorry.
go ahead.
For the div class container, can you explain again, when would you use container and when do you use container fluid?
Great question. So in my container, I'm going to add my H1 login back just so we can see it. You see how when I pull out my page all the way, we've got some space over here on the left and we've got some space over here on the right. What that's doing is it's saying, hey, if you're on a smaller screen size, your container is going to be full width or nearly full width.
Okay.
So what that means is when I pull my screen size all the way down, my container is actually the full width of the screen. But sometimes what you'll see is when you go all the way out, you don't want your content spilling all across a 28-inch monitor. You want your content kind of constrained in the center. So the best example of this is if you go to NewYorkTimes.com, you'll see no matter how big your monitor is, everything is constrained from here over to here, because otherwise everything would be spilling out inside of it, right? With that said, there are some websites, if we go to Amazon.com, that have their nav bar be the full fluid width, but then they constrain their page content down here. So it really comes down to your design. On my portfolio site, I made my top section be the full width in a container fluid. And then down here, I constrained it into a regular container. Wow. But when I pull it in, that container is going to shrink down. So when I get into a smaller screen size, it's still going to be full width.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So just so I'm clear, New York Times is container, Amazon is container fluid?
Amazon's nav bar is container fluid. Amazon's main section of the page still uses a container.
What's the difference between the container fluid again?
So here you can see this is spanning the full width of my screen. So anything that spans full width is going to be a container fluid.
Okay.
Now in here, we've got some breathing room over on the left and the right. That means that this would be in a max width container, so not a container fluid. But when I start pulling it down, now it looks like a container fluid because we hit the max width of the container.
Get it.
Max?
Yes.
May I ask why, what is the benefit of utilizing a container versus margins on a section?
same exact thing. The way that the container is implemented is by using a max width and a margin auto. So
Okay.
the container is just a pre-built class that Bootstrap has added for us. So container is not something that's like just built into HTML. The container is defined by Bootstrap. But if we wanted to make our own container and call it custom container, we would build that using margins and using a width.
Okay, thank
Margin
you.
and paddings and so on and so forth. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And if you want more information on that, if you go to the docs and just do a search for container, Bootstrap is going to give you all of this information, which is going to say a container which sets the max width at each responsive breakpoint, or a container fluid, which is 100% at all breakpoints. And so there's even more documentation in here in terms of what container to use, why we use it. And the main thing here is that not only are they adding that margin for us, they're also setting us up for rows and columns to work even better. Any other questions on that? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm thinking the only thing on this page is really going to be the card that's holding my login information. So there are multiple approaches we can take for our HTML, right? We can think about our HTML as I want to get all of my content in first, and then I'll go lay it out. Or I want to get my whole layout done first, and then I'll load up my components, and then I'll load in the content from there. So I'm going to start with, I want my layout done. I want my card kind of showing up in the right spot. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do a search for my card. And here is the card that I want to use. Now, it is entirely possible that you say, I don't want to use Bootstrap's card. I want to style it all myself. That's okay. You could say, I want to start with Bootstrap's card and then layer on my styling on top of it. That is also okay. Or you could say, all I want to do is use the Bootstrap card, and that's also fine. So we've got our div class card in here. So I'm going to go take that. I'm going to dump it in. And I know I've got a div class card body that I also need to use, and a little card title. So I'm actually going to take those two as well. I'm going to paste them in here, and I'm just going to close out my divs and make sure I have the right amount of them. And then I'm going to take out my H1 and just add in the word login. And let's see where that starts. Christy, I'm going to pause right after it. I'm going back in here. And now I've got my login card, but we've got to do some styling. So before we do that, I've got my container, I've got a card body, and I've got a card title. And at any point, if I lose my check mark on my prettier down here at the bottom, that means that I'm missing some closing tags or something is off, and I want to fix that before I add anything else. So what I'm going to do is, because I think this card is too big. So Shantina, to your point, I could use margin to get this to shrink in, but I'm thinking responsive on this first, right? I'm thinking I want to make sure that my card may be full width on mobile, but it's not going to be full width on a medium-sized screen. So I'm going to start with a medium-sized screen and say, hey, I can't use a column without a row. And in that row, I'm going to have a div class col4, and that's going to be my spacer call. And then I'm going to have another col4, and this is where I want my card to show up. So I'm going to I need to make sure I have got my starting div and my closing div lining up. I'm going to take that whole section and move it in to my col. Yes.
Why did you just decide a col4?
Because I think this will make more sense. If you look, I want to break my card, my site up into 3 equal areas. right? So if I wanted my card to be wider, I might do a 3, a 6, and a 3. But if I want it to be 3 equal columns, that I'm going to take 12, I'm going to divide it by 3. That gives me 4. And if I do 4, 4, and 4, now I'm going to get 3 equal columns.
I got it.
The other thing I'm noticing is this is right on the top, and that's going to bug me, right? I want to just shut that down a little bit. So I'm going to go to my style.css. The problem that I'm going to run into is I may use cards somewhere else on my site, and I don't want to add margin to every card anytime that I use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my div class container, and I'm going to add an ID to this that says login. And I'm actually going to call this login page because there may be other things. Login is a little generic, right? Or login, are you talking about the page? Are you talking about the button? Are you talking about the label for the form input? Are you talking about the H1? So I'm going to try and be more specific there. I'm going to say login page. And in my login page, now I want to target the class card and add a margin on the top of 50 pixels. So I'm going to come back over here. Now I've got my login card showing up and I'm making good progress. Stopping there for any questions.
So I got lost at card. So when you went into the components and then to the cards, you didn't pick a specific card. You picked certain elements of a card and used those.
Yeah, so I started cherry picking and I said, all right, well, I know I need my div class card, but I don't actually want the style width. So I'm going to not take that little part. And then I said, well, I don't want the image at the top, so I'm not going to take that. But card body is where I want everything to show up in. And that card body is what's giving us that nice little space around the outside of it. So I know I need that card body. Now I want my H5, my card title, because that login is going to look up nice, but I don't need the card text or the button at the bottom yet. I might come back and take them. So what I ended up doing is I copied this div first and then made sure it was closed out. Then I came back for these two, copied those, made sure those were closed out, and then I went in and started customizing them and adding in my text.
Now, when we're alone and working on our project, what would make us not just pick one of these?
Sometimes it is easier to take the whole thing and paste it into your code and then delete out the parts of it that you don't want.
Okay.
And that's also completely fine.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so now I'm going to finish up my layout before we go into any of the things going inside of our login screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to shrink this down. And now my login is super tiny. That's not going to be wide enough, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Bootstrap documentation and I'm going to go to layout and grid. And in here, there should be some documentation for I will find it. Mix and match about hiding them. And I'm afraid that they are going to be. It's probably not in grid. It's probably going to be in display. Utilities, toggle visibility. Nope, it's not that one. Oh, I saw it in here. Breakpoints, maybe. We're going to go the old school method. Bootstrap 5, hide column on mobile. There we go. There's the display property. They put it under utilities and display. So now they are going to say, here's some examples, hiding elements. And now here are all the classes that we can use to get them to hide on certain display sizes. So the reason we want to hide it is what we want to do is say, hey, on a medium-sized screen, this looks great. But on a bigger size screen, I want this col4 to go away. I only want that col4 to be there on medium-sized screens and up. So what I'm going to do is I want to say hidden only on extra small, hidden only on small. So I'm going to take these and combine them and say, I want to display this. I'm going to add that here. And I'm also going to add in the, well, let's see where that starts. So I'm on, let me save that and come back here. I'm on a medium-sized screen. I'm good to go. I'm going to shrink this down. And when I hit the small screen size breakpoint, now it jumped over to the left. And if we keep going and hit the extra small breakpoint, now it's back centered. So we want to fix that. So this may be one of those things when you see the end result, you're going to understand why we're doing it the way we are. So just give me 1 second. Let's get to the end result and then I will explain it. So we actually want to do D none. That should have worked. Okay, so let me do it like this. I'm going to go to my style and I'm going to target my col4 and I'm going to add a border of 5px solid red. Okay, so here are our two columns that we have, right? And when I open this one, this is just my spacer column. So the area coming from over here, that's from my container, not my container fluid, just my regular container. Now, because I want this in the center of the screen, I need to push it over to that center of the screen. So in order to do that, I'm going to put in this col4, which means this col4 is now in the center. And if we put one final col4 in there, we would see our whole grid system, right? There's our final col4. But what I want to do is that when this is on a medium or bigger screen size. But what I want it to do is when I hit a small screen or larger, I want this column to go away and my login column to take up the full amount of the space. So we haven't made our login column take up the full amount of the space yet, but what I need to do is make this column go away. So when it does go away, we've got the space to make our center col4 bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this down. And when I shrink it down and hit a small screen size or smaller, that column now disappears. And if I keep going smaller, it stays disappeared. So here's how I did that. I said, hey, this is going to be a col4, but I want you to not show up. That's the D none. Display none until you hit a medium-sized screen. And then once you're on a medium-sized screen, show this col4.
Max, does the order that you put them inside the class matter at all?
Yes.
The order of these two matter. I don't think the order of this one matters.
So the D none and the black one?
Yes, I think the first two, the order does matter. And here's where I'm getting this from. This was not just Max is telling you it works that way, so it just works that way. If you go back to the Bootstrap documentation, they're saying hide on LG and wider screens. Well, that's this one up at the top. We don't want that. We don't want to hide it on large screens and up. We want to hide it on screens smaller than a certain size. So I looked at this documentation and I saw they're using a D none and that DLG block. But I didn't want it to be on large screens and smaller. I only wanted it to hide on medium-sized screens and smaller. So what I did is I come up here and I see, oh, they've got this, the LG, I can swap that out for the MD, and that's what's going to make it hide.
And is that hide on medium-sized screens and smaller, or anything under a medium-sized screen?
The way we did it is we said anything under a medium-sized screen, hide it.
Got it. Thank you.
And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to adjust our col4. And we're going to say, hey, on a medium-sized screen, it should be a col4. But on a smaller screen, it should take up the full width. And so now when I'm in here, I've got my spacer column showing up because we're on a medium-sized screen. And as I start shrinking that down, what you're going to see is not only my spacer column disappear, you're also going to see my login column go full width. So this is a two-step process. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, for the login card itself, on a small screen or smaller, make it 12, make it take up the full width. But on a medium or bigger, make it take up 4. And then we are partnering that with our spacer column. So we're saying, hey, by default, don't show up until we hit a medium-sized screen. And on medium-sized screens or larger, make that column 4 to push our other col4 over to the center of the screen. Zach, question.
When you're inputting like D none, D medium block, does it matter if there's a period at the beginning of that?
It
On the
does.
website?
You don't
Okay.
want a period. So the documentation is telling you, is putting the period in here to let you know that it is a class. But whenever we use our class, we do class equals instead of the period. And that's how the HTML knows it is a class. So it's common nomenclature because, or common syntax, I should say, because because CSS uses period for class and a # for an ID. That's kind of the documentation telling you, hey, col SM12 is a class, it isn't an ID. All right, I feel like we are teetering on getting it, but at the same time being overwhelmed. So I'm going to restart the poll and let's see where you guys are at. The good news is this is the hardest thing that we are doing tonight. Everything else from here goes downhill in terms of getting easier. Not going downhill in terms of not being any more or less fun.
I'm just following along, so I didn't answer the poll because.
Cool, no problem.
Yeah, okay.
I did answer the poll, but I'm not following along anymore, but I'm just gonna go over it later.
Okay. I would say don't completely, and not that I think you would completely tune out, but it's going to get easier from here. This is the hardest part of the responsive layout that we're doing tonight. So everything from here should be a little bit easier. Okay.
I'm following along. I'm just way behind from where you are now.
Gotcha. Not a problem. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm following along and it it came up. I just have a question about, I don't know if this is prettier or not. It's like giving me a red, it's saying that the script is not working, or it's saying that.
Go ahead and
I
share
don't
your
know
screen. Let's take a look.
And so I just want to be sure that it'll run. Hold on. This is what I'm referring to.
Go to the end of line 8.
They're closing.
I
or
don't know
something?
how to like get there.
If you
'Cause
have
I'm
a
arrow, but it's like,
horizontal scroll bar down here,
oh.
and you're missing your closing arrow tag right there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Feel free to jump in with a screen share if you have them, or if you're stuck somewhere.
I had a question about the two call fours.
Yep.
So you didn't include a third one, and is that legitimate? Will that not confuse Bootstrap at all?
Correct, because we have Barney mode is activated again.
Because
Apologies
it's
in
just empty
advance.
space after.
Yeah, because we have defined this as 2 size columns, we don't need to add in another column there. So if we did just leave this off and made this just like a regular col, then it would cause problems because it would go into that other area, and that would cause issues. So what we need to do here is, as long as we are sizing it and constraining it, it is okay. It is in both valid HTML and valid Bootstrap not to put in the extra spacer column.
Got it. Thanks.
I really do not understand how the light can get through a closed blind and make my camera freak out that much. Oh, great. This is, now we've turned on the special effects and I'm a hologram now. This is just.
Yeah, that's the look right there.
Perfect. That's the one. Oh God, come on. You can do it. Oh, screw it. Okay. Let me just. Guys, you're gonna get a lot of green coming your way. Let me see if I can just turn off. Oh, that's a little bit better. Okay, so I would like to get our login buttons here, and then we will take our break, and I will help anyone catch up who needs it. Also, beat my web camera, so color balance isn't a problem. Okay, so I am going to go back to the Bootstrap documentation. I want to go into the forms because the form is what I want to work on next. I'm going to come down just to the overview, and I'm going to just scroll down. And this is, oh, beautiful. I want an email. I want a password. All of this is what I want. So Christy, we're going to take advantage of what you were asking about. Sometimes it is easier to take the whole thing and delete out what we don't want, as opposed to taking pieces of what we do want. So I'm going to take this whole form tag. I'm going to hit the copy button. I'm going to come into my card body, right? Because I know I want it to be in the inside part of my card. And I'm going to paste that whole big chunk of code in there.
Okay, hold on a second. So we went into forms and we were in input.
I'm in forms and overview.
Oh, forms overview. And then
it is the first block of code in that overview section.
Forms overview. Oh, yeah. Copy.
So I'm going to come in here, and now this is actually really close to what I want, but that red column is going to drive me crazy, right? We've already got our layout done. We don't need a reminder that the spacer column is in there pushing things over. So all I need to do is go back to my style, delete out my col4. And now we're in business. But I'm not going to stop here. We'll never share your email with anyone else. Well, that's not entirely true, right? If they pick an option to do the direct option, we will share their email. So I'm going to just come in here, find wherever that will never share your email with anyone else's, and delete out that div. And then we can come down, and here's our password, everything looks good there. This is a good one to call out, this input type equals password. What that's going to tell the browser is when I type in here, I can see those letters. But when I come down into the password and I type in, it's going to show me the dots instead. And so that type equals password is what is making it work differently than this type equals email or type equals text like we've done before. So I'm going to come down. And now I've got this whole check me out section. I don't really need that, right? So I'm going to come into this whole, I don't need the input checkbox. I don't need the input form label. And because I don't need either of these, I know I don't need this entire div. So I'm going to take that entire div and delete it out. Save, come over here. There's my submit button. I want to make two tweaks to that. One, I hate all submit buttons. Every submit button should be called an action button instead. So instead of saying submit, it should say what the action of the button is going to do. So I'm going to come in. I don't want to change my type submit here because that's telling the browser submit the form. That we want to leave in. But where it says submit here, this is just the label of the button itself. So in that button, I want to say login. So I'm come back over here. Now, the other thing is because our card, we've done all of that work on the layout. I would really like this button to span the full width. So it looks like it is the size of my input button. Well, that's really easy. I can just go to my login page. And because the only button on my login page is this one, I can just add my BTN target and make the width 100%. I save, I come back over here. There's my login button. Beautiful. So we are a little ahead of schedule. Barney mode has been deactivated a whole 14 minutes early. I'm telling you, it's like 3 minutes of the sun coming through my window, and that throws off the whole camera. And I just want to show if we size this down, it will hit a certain screen size and then go to that full width. And now we can size it up and it scales pretty well.
Is there a difference between width being 100% and then max width being 100%?
There is. So if we did, we can actually use both in this situation. So we could say, hey, I want my width to be 100%, but I don't want my width to get bigger than, let's say, 200 pixels. And so what that's going to do is if we're on a smaller screen and the width of the 100% is going to be smaller than 200, it's going to leave it at whatever 100% is. But when we get to a certain screen size, it's going to say, hey, this whole area may be 250 pixels, but our max width is only going to be the 200 that you set. I can't hear you in person.
If you just send, thank you. If you just set the max width at 100%, the element could potentially be smaller, but the highest it would grow is 100% of the container.
You got it. But in this case, it's not doing that because there's nothing pushing it bigger. There's nothing telling it you should try to go to the 100%. So width is going to be basically your starting point, and then this is going to be your control of the actual width that gets calculated. So this would actually work even without this one. The width is going to be automatically calculated based off of the length of the text plus the padding built into that, right? But what I could say is I actually want the max width to be 30 pixels. And what that's going to do is it's going to crop it in and say, hey, I don't care how many letters are in this. The whole thing can't be more than 30 pixels.
And does the max width apply to the element itself, the width of the element, or the width of the parent that it's in?
It applies to whatever selector you have. So on this one, it is going to target, because I have a BTN class on it, it is going to target this whole element.
Okay, so what would you do to make?
It's
Right.
saying be the maximum width you can be within the container that you're in.
But
Oh,
the
that's what I'm
100%
asking. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yes.
Works really good for things that are already big, so that you can make them small, but still like not have to like stick to just pixels, because that makes it unresponsive.
Right.
But min width would work for something that's smaller, because you can say the minimum width that this is allowed to be is 80%, and then it will never be smaller than 80%.
Oh, thank you.
Does that make sense?
So a common use is you tend to use min width and max width with percentage is on the regular width, so that it is somewhat responsive. But something common to do here is I could say, like, I want my max width to be 300 pixels. And then I want to add a margin on that of 0 auto. And what that's going to do is it's going to center it. So if I'm in here, there's my width 100%. I'm going to get to a certain size where it's going, oh, no, that's going to make a liar out of me. Let's do it this way instead. Okay, here's a better example. So there's my width 100% because it's growing to the size of the container, and this width is still less than my max width. But I'm going to hit a certain point where my max width is kicking in, and now because this 100% is greater than 300, it's going to constrain it to the 300 of this button. So even though my width 100% is pushing it past 300, it's going to cap that top and make it constrained there.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't know why margin 0 auto always hates me, but I won't take it personally. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to stick around for the next 5 to 10 minutes. If anyone wants to try and catch up, that is completely fine. Hopefully you all have access to the code from the live share link. If you would like to try and catch up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, that's fine. If you're just going along with the ride, that's also fine. From here, the only last thing we need to do on this page is add our A tag, so that when we click the login button, it's going to take us to our dashboard screen. And then we're going to pull up our mockups from yesterday and start working on the dashboard.
I have a question.
Yep.
And I think you went over this, but I had fallen behind. How did you get your submit button to be centered or go across the expanse?
Yep. All we did is in our style.css, we added this login page BTN and made it a width 100%.
Okay, I did that, but mine still looks like it's not fully going across the.
Let's take a look. Okay.
I don't.
Okay, go to your style.css.
Yep. I can't even see the top of this. Hold on.
Okay, and that's because you've got your max width in there. I was just adding that in for an example for Larry's question. So if you take that out, what you're going to say is it doesn't matter how big 100% is. So take that
So
whole line out.
100% will just cause it to go across the expanse of, okay, never mind. That
Exactly.
makes sense.
So just save that, and then your HTML should be, yep, there you go. Now you should be good to go.
What happened?
I'm guessing your index.html doesn't have anything in the body tag.
Let me go back.
Yeah, so you don't have anything in there. So if you start your live server again, and then up in the URL, change index.html to login.html. Yep, there you go.
Thank you.
No problem. Other questions? Okie doke. Let's take a break. We will be back at 7:15. If you guys have a minute, please fill out that weekly feedback form sometime this weekend at the end of tonight's class, whatever it is. With that said, before we dive back into our project, does anyone have questions that came up over the break? Okay, so we're going to dive right back in. We've got our login page pretty much finished up. The one thing I want to do is make it so when we click on login, we get to our dashboard. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to confirm we already have our dashboard.html made for us. So what I'm going to do is just wrap this entire button in an A tag. And I am going to say that is going to my dashboard.html. Save that. And now when I come over here and click on my login button, it's going to do nothing because, oh, I wonder if the type submit is actually causing it not to work. I'm going to take this type submit off. No, I'm not. I'm going to try and cut it temporarily and see if that's causing the problem. No, it's not. It just would like to be a pain. Dashboard goes here, login, 5600. Wow, I feel like I am missing something obvious and I don't know what it is. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to try taking my form out. Okay. So let me explain what happened there. Because we've got all of this in a form tag, this A tag is getting overwritten by the button because the button is really trying to make this form submit. But this form doesn't have any styling impact right now. It will only have an impact when we actually deal with getting the login to work, doing the authentication, checking the password, all of that stuff. So what we are going to do is we're going to temporarily comment this form out, both at the top and the bottom. And that's what's going to make our A tag work again. When we come back to this and are actually dealing with the form submission and getting the email address and making sure the login is correct and all of that stuff, we'll come back. So now that I've got my form tag, both the opening one and the closing one commented out, when I hit the login button, now I am into my dashboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the screenshot from yesterday. And looks like we've got our nav bar up at the top. We've got the personal feedback form going over here, and then we've got a nice table going on. So we're going to jump through those three sections. I will take a break after each one of the three. And then the goal is for the rest of the night, either work on catching up or get started on your own capstone, work on your own wireframes, get your project set up, start thinking through your pages. Let me know if you have any questions with Trello, all of that. But first, let's get this page done. So start at the top. I'm going to search for my nav bar. I'm going to scroll down, and the first nav bar I see has a lot of stuff going on in it. It's got the search, it's got the links, it's got all of that. Now, we've already covered both ways, right? We could take this whole thing and start deleting things out, or I'm going to try and find a little simpler one. So image and text. This looks like a nice simple one for me of what I actually want. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back into my code, and I'm going to close out of my login.html. I'm done with that. I'm working all in my dashboard.html. So what I'm going to do is take out my H1, and I'm going to add my container here. And inside my container, I'm dropping in my entire nav bar. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to come here. There is my nav bar. So I'm going to look at my outline, and I've got feedback. That's going to be our placeholder. I've got a link for the home, and I've got a drop down going over here on the right. So I'm going to say, hey, my nav bar is going to say feedback, call it feedback app. My link is going to go to the home, and then we don't need features, pricing, or that disabled one. So we're going to take all of that out, and we've got our feedback app, and we've got our home. Okay, so now we need to get our little profile icon showing up over there on the right. So I'm going to scroll back up, and I'm going to find something that has something going on over here on the right. Let me pull this out a little bit more. That search bar is over on the right. So I want to see how they did that. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to find the search, and it looks like they have, actually, let's go down to the placement section. Placement default, placement fixed, bottom. That's actually not what I wanted. I wanted placement over on the right. So I think it's this deflex that's doing it. So let's see what happens if I take this form and copy it and paste it in. So this is a really important thing. There, we've got a whole bunch of closing tags going on here, right? So we've got to do some work on that. We've got to figure out. It looks like it is 2 tags in from the bottom. So it's in a container fluid, but it is not in our nav bar brand. So I believe, let's see, we've got our container fluid and we've got our nav bar brand. So it's going to be at that level. So I'm going to follow that all the way down, and I think it's going to go in there. So let's see. All right, now we've got our search bar going on over at the right. So now we can come in here and update this and find our drop down, and our drop down is going on up here, right? So all of this code is making this drop down appear. So I'm mixing and matching here, right? And that's a lot of your Bootstrap code is going to be doing that. So I'm going to take my whole LI here for my entire drop down. And because this LI and this LI are at the same indentation level, I know this is everything going on with my drop down. So I'm going to come in here. I don't want a form. I just want a div going on. And I'm going to replace everything in this search with my dropdown. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over. Now we've got some funkiness going on. We've got a dot going on here and a link. And if I click on my link, now I get my dropdown. So we're kind of on the right track. We know we want our profile thing to show up there, but we've got to do some additional work. And I think what the problem is this LI, think of your LIs are your list items, right? Those are your bullet points. So I think what's going to happen if we take this LI and make it a div instead and save that, now we got rid of our little bullet point and we've got our link going on. So I know this is a lot of playing around with Bootstrap, and look now at how many closing tags we have here. So a lot of this is trial and error, and sometimes you will get into this, not know where you're putting it, and delete it out and just try over again from scratch, right? And that's okay. This is all about fitting your components together, Nav bars are unfortunately one of the most complicated things in HTML to pull off right to make them responsive. But at the same time, because they are the top of the site, they are the first thing that you work on. So I lied. Nav bar may be actually a little bit harder than the columns we just worked through. I promise it is going to get easier from here though. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I don't want it to say link. I want it to say something like settings. And then down in our drop down items, we can add something for like profile, maybe something for settings, and then our logout button down here at the bottom. So I take a look at that. Now I click on settings. I got my profile, my settings, and my logout. Maybe we make that a little, instead of calling it settings, let's make it our little profile icon.
Max, can you show again where you found the drop-down menu?
I sure can. Pick that one and save that. And now we've got our little profile icon up there. So our drop-down, I scrolled up and all I wanted to do was find an example with this little arrow on it. So when I did, I clicked on that and I saw my drop-down. So now I need to break down in my code where I find that, right? So we've got our Nav Bar brand, and that's the Nav Bar scroll right here. Then we have a home button, and I'm going to find that A tag and see that home button there. Then I see my link, and I don't want the regular link. I want my nav item drop down. So I know I want not only this link, but when I click on the link, I get my little drop down to show up. So that means that I not only need the link with the drop down toggle class on it, I need this entire UL with the drop down menu included with it. So what I did is I realized that this LI, including the A tag and the UL inside of it, is what my entire drop down component is. That's what I needed. So that's why I took that whole thing, came over here and put it in. But I combined that with this deflex, which is pushing it over to the right side of the nav bar.
Thank you.
Why is the deflex pushing it to the right without, I mean, other than looking at their CSS, why is it pushing it to the right without like, you know,
It looks like because this collapse is set up to use a flex already. So it looks like this deflex, let's see what happens if we took that class off. Okay, nothing. So the answer is that deflex isn't really doing anything. What is pushing it over is the links area. And that's what has the padding built in to take up the rest of the space and push anything that's not in this collapse, nav bar collapse area over to the right.
Okay, so right now just the deflex is just making it act as a row by default, I guess.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it looks like we don't even need that deflex on there.
And what's with the LI in Bootstrap if there's not necessarily any?
Yeah, so they basically are using LI and then hiding the bullet point, because when we think about a drop down, this is essentially a list of drop down items, right? And so that's why Bootstrap is using the LI to say, hey, each one of these items in the drop down menu is a list item, and then we'll just hide the bullet point for that.
Would you do that normally though?
I can't find the nav bar that you just picked.
I would do that. It is common to hide a list item bullet point because you get some styling benefits of having it in a list. But you wouldn't have to. If you wanted to do them all as divs, you could do that as well. Wayne, the nav bar that I'm on, I'm in components nav bar. And I happen to be, looks like about halfway down the page under the nav bar scroll section. But there are a lot of them, even if you go all the way up to the top one will have the drop down in it as well. And so if you want to take it right from the one all the way up at the top, it's going to be right in here is what you want for the drop down.
That's just weird. It's not coming up for me.
All right, do we have any other questions on our nav bar?
Yes,
Yeah.
where did you get the little man?
I use the profile icon. I'm sorry, an emoji. So in my A tag, the first tag in my nav item, I hit Command Control Space, and that picked up my emoji picker, and then I just typed in person, and that made it come up.
Hold on. Does this look diff? Oh, you little crapper. Really?
Max, on a side note, any benefactors for the laptops yet?
Sorry, what was the question?
I said, any benefactors for the MacBooks yet?
Not that I know of. I will touch base. Jesse's actually out next week. So I will touch base with Jesse at the beginning of week 7 and let you know if we have any updates on that.
Thank you.
Oh, that is super cool. Can you tell me that one more time? Command
Control Space.
Control.
Okay. So if we go back to our section, we've got our grid system working from here on out, right? We've got our personal feedback link. We know that's going to be in a call 3. And then this looks like it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so we know the rest of the page is going to go into that call 9. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I've got div soup going on down here at the bottom. I need to figure out where my container is to make sure we're going in the right spot. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top. Here's my div container. I'm going to click on that, follow it down, follow my slightly brighter white line. This is the end of my container. So I'm going to come outside of my nav and I'm going to do my div class row. And in my row, I'm going to have a call 3. And I'm also going to have a div class call that's going to take up the rest of the space. I'm going to say table goes here. And I'm going to say link info goes here. Save, come back over. Now my layout is looking the way I want it to.
You said take up the rest of the space, but you didn't put like a number or anything like that. So is that just
correct?
Like,
Yeah.
when it does that?
Yeah. So when you don't put a number, it will take up the rest of the available space unless you have multiple divs in here. So if what it will do in this situation is it will say, hey, this 3 is a 3. So you're only going to have 9 available. But because you've got 2 columns without size, it is going to evenly split it between those 2. But if basically what it's saying is take up the rest of the available space unless there are multiple columns and then share that space amongst yourselves. So we got
the other 2 going 4.5 and 4.5?
Correct.
Okay.
Dirty trick for when you need to when you need more than 12 is to just not specify the number, and Bootstrap will share that space amongst the remaining columns. Okay, so what we are going to do is we want to get our link info working. So let's look at our mockup. Looks like we've got something that says personal feedback link and it's got 2 buttons for our copy and our email. So we are going to, whoa, I did not mean to do that. Okay, so in my link info goes here. I am going to do one that is going to be just a div. I'm going to add my class onto that of text-center. And my attention span is so short. Personal feedback link is what we want to put in there. Personal feedback link. And then it looks like I've got 2 buttons side by side here. So because of that, I'm going to do a new row that's going to be here. And then I'm going to do 2 columns, 1 column here, and then the other column over here. So I'm going to do inside my col3, I'm going to do another div class row. Then I'm going to do a class of a col. And I'm just going to say button 1 and copy that, paste it, and do my button 2. So I save, I come over, I've got button 1 and button 2 showing up. So the last thing I need to do for that area is go back into my components, go to my buttons. I'm going to take my top button here, come over, replace button 1 with that button link and say copy link. And this one I'm going to paste in and say email. Come back to my feedback app. Okay, I've got them there, but they look pretty ugly. What I would like to do is put my personal feedback link all in one card, so it's all kind of contained. And then I need to get my buttons to look centered out or look nice. So I think what I can do is get away with saying, hey, that whole row should be centered. So now my email, my buttons might be lining up. Find out in 1 minute. So I'm going to come in here and say this whole col3 is going to be in a card. And that's what added my little border going on there. I don't know if my text centered worked or not, but now we're going to say, hey, that whole card is in the body of the card. Never mind, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is manually apply some padding. So we're going to add an ID on this that says share link. I'm going to go to my style. I'm going to target my share link. And I'm going to add padding of 10 px. And the last thing I want to do is figure out if my text center was working or not. It does look like it's centering it there. So make one more change and then I will go over this. I'm going to move my. So the problem was I put my card here, but because I put it on the column class, it doesn't really like it when you try to use 2 Bootstrap components on the same div, unless they're meant to work together like deflexes. So really what I should do is take my card and my share link and put them on their own div. There we go. That's looking better. Okay, let me take a break there. I want to let you guys catch up a little bit before we finish off with the table component. Gonna relaunch the poll. And if anyone's stuck anywhere or completely fine to say, like, just keep going. I'm just watching along.
Did the light go out in person or did y'all want the light out?
Yes, Nicole said because you're not here, the light is out.
I just pinged Jesse to see if we can get a update on the lights going out. Hopefully by the time we are back in person, that will be resolved.
Actually, when we were there yesterday, it was kind of fixed. Like after somebody moved, after the lights went out, it came back on. We thought it was fixed.
It was like that today too, but then the last time it went out, it just went out.
Oh, dang. They probably got it on like a timer then. Oh, think about
It's
it.
because you didn't come to class.
Yeah, maybe it's your
today.
fault, Nicole.
You didn't
Oh,
come to
dang. Nah, I was like, yep, y'all go in and I'm staying home.
Left us all in the dark.
All right, it seems like most of you are just going along for the ride at this point. So I'm going to finish it up and then we'll have time at the end of class. Hopefully, so you guys get a chance to get a jump start on your capstones and your ideas and thinking there. Or if you want to catch up on this, it is good practice because you will find there will be things that you want to use from Bootstrap or style yourself, right? So this is the life of a developer, of cobbling together this code and pulling off our final vision. So I am going to just finish us off here with going back to Bootstrap, and I want to find the tables. And here's this nice little table that's got a breakdown of everything that I want. So I'm going to take this whole table block. I'm going to come back over and make sure that I'm in my column, and I'm going to just paste that whole table in there. So come back to my feedback app. Now I've got my table in there, and I can start building out my sections. So I've got message info, message, type, and reply. So I'm going to say info, message, type, and reply. And then it looks like I've got 1, 2, 3. I'm going to just make these TDs. So we've got, let me break this down. We've got, I think this is the first time we're using tables, which I'm realizing I should take a step back on. We got a whole bunch of classes and elements in here that we probably haven't seen before. The table is what contains all of it, right? That is what's telling HTML, hey, we're going to be sending you some specific HTML elements that you know are going to impact layout. T head is the head of the table. That's what's saying, hey, this top section should be bold. That's going to be our column names. Our TR is a table row. We could technically have multiple rows in the table head if we wanted to. The TH is for table header. That means that anything coming up in that is going to show up as a bold kind of header. Then we come out of our table head and go into our table body, where we are reusing our TRs. And then if we want it to show up in bold, we're going to use a TH, which is our table header. And then we're going to use a TD for table data. So let's break that down. This whole thing is our table element. This top row is our table head. Our T head can have multiple rows in it. So this also goes into a table row. Then each one of these items is going to be a TH because we want it to show up in bold, our table head. Now we also are going to come down into our table body. We are still going to use our TRs because those are each of our individual rows. And then inside of our rows, we're going to use TDs as our table data. So it is helpful to look at this and overlay it with what's showing up over in our actual app. So info, message, type, reply. That's very easy to see over here. I remember to save info, message, type, reply. That all needs to go into a table row. And in our table row, that's all going to go into the table head. Now, when we come down into our table body, we can start working with each individual row. So you can think of each one of these TDs in here of being the value of the column. And each one of these TRs is just grouping it so we know all of that goes into one row. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, this was received 4/28 at 7:45 p.m. And let's look at our mockup. What else did we have in there? 15 responses right underneath it. So we're going to use our break and say 15 responses. And we used a little blue icon in here. That's our control command space to make that show up. Then we had some message. And then down here, we say anonymous. And then the last one, we need to put our buttons in. I'm going to save all of that. I come over here. Now I've got my info showing up, my message, my type, and my reply for my buttons. So I'm going to come up. I'm going to borrow one of my buttons here and come down into this. And I'm going to say this one is going to say mark as read. Now I've got my button showing up there. And if I pull out my screen size, that might look a little bit bigger, a little bit better. So I just need to take this row, take out my two other dummy placeholder ones, paste it in twice, and update it. And we're going to take out the red one there. And we're going to say second message. Just load up our data. Direct and relay, I think we said. Take a look there. We've got our third message in. We've got our different times showing up. We've got direct and our mark is red. And then I think the last thing we had was the reply button that we have to add. So we're going to just take these two and say reply. And put this one up here and say reply. All right, those buttons are really ugly. Let's clean those up just a little bit. I'm gonna say in my dashboard, I want to add an ID all the way up at the top. So I can target just my dashboard page. And in my styles, I can say in the dashboard, target the table. And in the table, there are buttons. And those buttons should have a margin on the bottom, 10 pixels. That made them space out a little bit, and maybe they should also be a width of 100%. And the very last thing we could do is push it off the top of the page, but I think this is a good stopping point. So from here, it would be very helpful for us to go back in and leave some notes on the status of this project. And that's when we would go into Trello. So one thing I'd like to do actually this weekend is get together a Trello board for this project. And hopefully you guys can model your capstone progress off that Trello board if you would like to use it. So that is something that I will put on my to-do list. But I think we're at a really good spot for this so that when we come back to it, we would be able to keep on working on it and getting some of that functionality working. With that said, I'm going to open the floor up to any questions. I know we're ending early, but the hope is that you start working on your capstone, you start thinking about your requirements, or you work on coding up on this if you feel like you need a little bit more practice with Bootstrap. With that said, if you think that you've got a good starting place for your app and you're like login screen, that's what I want to get working, spend the next 15 minutes working on your login screen, getting your project set up, going through that process. But I'm going to open it up to any questions here because the point of Project Week is that you are working on your own projects, right? So want to leave some time at the end for any questions on what we did, why we did it, or really any questions all the way up until week 5, because this is your last chance before we dive into the next section.
Okay, I have a question in regards to my idea for my capstone.
Yep.
If I wanted to do something based off of something I've seen like on a larger scale, but make it like geared towards Syracuse,
Great
Could I do
idea.
that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We want to be careful about like copyright issues, so we don't want to use anyone else's images or logos
Right.
or content, but it is completely fine to model your idea off of an existing app. You know, Ariel last cohort did a dating app and modeled it off you know, an existing dating app, but then did the COVID spin on it. So modeling it off of another app or idea or website is completely fine.
Okay, definitely want the idea. It would definitely be something like my own, but the idea. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I had a question, Max, about the layout you were just showing us.
Yes.
If you make it narrower, do you get the mini menu icon, the hamburger icon?
Ew. Well, that's ugly. Yeah, we can fix that by so this nav bar toggle icon has this nav bar collapse, and I think that our drop down item would have to be inside of that. So this is going to be ugly, but if this is going to take me a minute, but you're welcome to go along for the ride with me. I'm going to come down and take this out and put it in okay, that's kind of better. So now what I did is I took the div out and put it inside of this nav bar collapse. And so because it's now inside of this div, it knows that when I click on the menu, I want it to show up in here. And then when I click on it from there, that still works. So that solves the problem, but it doesn't push it over to the right side. And so in order to do that, I would probably need to look at the flex utilities. And I really would like the line items. There's a way to that's interesting. There's a flex fill that we could try and get to work. It's also a flex grow. I was hoping that there was a so Flexbox Froggy is going to be your friend here. I know that that was a link from a while ago, but Flexbox Froggy is going to teach you Flex a lot better than I am going to. With that said, we can try. What happens if we do a flex grow on one of them? Nav bar item. Let's make that flex grow. Oh, I can't believe that worked. Okay, so what I did. First of all, I had to move the nav item dropdown into the nav bar collapse because that's what's telling the HTML, hey, when I get into that size, anything that is in that nav bar collapse class is going to go into the menu. The other thing that I did is initially, I have just my nav bar item in here and a second nav item. So they're going to show up next to each other. But really what I want this home button to do is grow out as wide as it can, but still leave space for my little profile icon over on the right. So in order to do that, I came into my UL and I added another navbar class, another Bootstrap Flex class in here. and I use this flex fill. So if I put that in here and save, now this home button, if we look at it in the inspect, it knows the home button is only taking up that much space, but it's going to fill the rest of the space, which will push my profile icon over to the right.
Did you put that specifically on the home?
I put it on the UL because if I wanted to, I could add another nav item in here that's called like second link. And that would show up in the right spot.
Where did you put that flex?
The
Grow.
flex,
Oh, because the drop down's not in the UL.
Yeah.
So there's a UL, then there's a div with the drop down link
Right.
instead of a list item. Remember, we changed the drop down from a list item to a div. So so he put it on the UL
But
because
you just moved that. Didn't you just move that drop down in between that because you did the collapse?
it's in the nav bar collapse, but not in the unordered
The
list.
thing is in the UL is the home. The home and the picture icon is not in there. So just tell the home, fill as much as you can.
Fill it until you get to the
All
picture.
right, so even though it's not,
But not the home, the unordered list, and the home is the list, the only list item in the unordered
right,
list.
that's.
Yeah, yep.
All right.
to be fair, you could take this flex fill and put it on the LI. No, you couldn't, because that's a inline item.
Oh.
Boo. Never mind, you have to put it on the UL.
If you were to put it like display block or whatever.
Why couldn't
Would it do it different?
You could, you have to be careful though
Eat your
when,
pasta, please. Sorry, guys.
let's try. Yeah, that won't work because Flex is the better solution in this place. But I'm wondering if I do a width 100. Yeah, so I could do a display block if I made the width of that block 100%, and that would achieve the same thing of pushing this over. So that's a good example of you can use multiple display systems. I mean, we could solve this with a grid if we really wanted to, right? We could make this go into a column and then push the other one over using our offset. So there are lots of different ways of achieving this. You could flex it, you could block it and width 100% it, or you could add in a grid system. But I personally think in this one, the flex fill is probably the cleanest of the solutions. But that is a great point, Larry, of yes, you could display block it.
And you went over the grow again or no?
Yeah, so basically we did flex
Instead of
fill,
that,
which is
instead
similar
of-
to flex grow. What flex fill is doing is it's just saying fill all the available space on this item.
Got it.
Grow would only change if.
Well, Liz.
I was saying the grow, I believe, would only change it if you stretch the picture out. So it would grow in a certain ratio compared to the other stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
Got it.
You're right
Got
there,
it.
Larry. But if you don't have another number set on it, it automatically assumes to grow the full amount. So it is like fill, but it's giving you more control. If you wanted to say, I want the icons over on the left to be 50% of the remaining space, and then the ones over here to be the other 50%.
Okay.
Got it.
So you are right in that grow and shrink are in relation to each other. But if you don't want them in relation to each other, you can just use your fill or not specify a grow on the other one, and then it will just act like fill would.
Okay.
But again, if you're lost on all the flex stuff, Flexbox Froggy is going to be your friend of going through those exercises. If you don't have any questions and are feeling burnt out and not in a good place to start working on your capstone, I would encourage you to try and take a stab at the requirements doc that we did here. I know this seems like a lot of documentation for your own project when you are the client, but it's really helpful to get everything out of your head and down on paper. And whether that's a Google Doc or whether that's a note card or a Post-it note or whatever it is, just starting to document where your project is headed is going to make it easier to get into wireframes. And once you're in wireframes, it's going to be easier to get the code started. So I would highly encourage you to get something like this started, just getting your thoughts out of your head and onto paper. With that said, I am going to stick around. Christy, good starting point. I see you showing off over there. I would encourage you to get started on that because in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be knocking on your door and going, you haven't scheduled a one-on-one on your capstone yet. How's your progress going? And you do not want to come back to me and say, oh, I didn't think you were serious about that, because we will be coming back to this in project week number 2. I think it's week 11 overall in the schedule. And I'm going to, yes, project week 11, and we're going to be running full bore ahead on JavaScript. And if you don't have any HTML done with all of your pages built out, there's going to be no place for us to put your JavaScript. So something to think about. It's not something that needs to be done this weekend, but you do want to start thinking about progress and holding yourself accountable and having some deliverables for that.
Max, have you ever had anyone team up on a capstone project?
We have not. I don't know that I would be opposed to it, but I would want to make sure that you were doing equal parts of every step. And what I mean by that is it would be pretty easy to say, oh, I'm going to do all the HTML and I'm going to have my partner do all the JavaScript. And then, I'll do all the database stuff. They can do all the API stuff and we'll call it a day. And the point of the capstone is that, you are taking all the concepts from class and getting to practice on them. So I wouldn't completely rule out a group project. I would just want to make sure that while you were working on the group project, you each, whoever was in the group felt like they were all getting to do HTML and all getting to do JavaScript instead of kind of divide and conquer on it. So if you do have someone in mind that you want to work with on a group capstone, I would have to check with Jesse on that and make sure that's okay with him. But it would just be a matter of making sure that, there was enough to go around so that you were all getting practice in all the different concepts we're learning.
All right, thank you.
That's all I have for tonight. Like I said, I will stick around if you have any questions. If you're burnout and you want to get out of here, that's completely fine. Otherwise, I will stick around for any questions on getting projects started or anything we covered tonight. Christy, go ahead.
Can I go in the breakout room with Caitlin and ask a question?
Sure can. Caitlin, you good to do that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can, but I'll have to move physically into another room.
Oh, that's right. She's there.
Yeah.
Never mind. I
don't mind, but
do you want to just ask the question, Christy, and maybe it's one that's good for all of us to see or hear?
Yes. So wait, let me go. So the other day when you were doing the it's a very easy question. That's why I was gonna go.
It's okay.
The other day when you were doing before you started the wireframe, when I took the pink and white lines and tried to put them into
diagrams.net, it threw a fit.
It didn't line up. So I had to just stop and
yeah, so go ahead and share your screen. I think that's going to be one that's better for you to do than for me to re-show, if that makes sense at all.
Yes, definitely. Let's see. Share my screen. So let me. Is this the right? Are you in the?
I'm on, I see your desktop with 5 icons.
All right, that's the wrong screen. Wait a second. Share my screen. I got a new monitor yet again today. Oh, I am. All right, put this down. Put this.
I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
remember last time how you showed me the VGA to the C?
Mhm.
So I bought that. So if I wanted to get another monitor and have 3, how would I get my VGA to work with something else? Because I tried on my Windows laptop and it just wouldn't work at all.
Your MacBooks only have 2 ports on them, right? Plus headphones. They're like 2 USB-C ports.
Yeah, but I bought a dock. And so now it still only has 2. But it also has like USB and HDMI.
So you couldn't use 2 VGA monitors unless you got a USB-C to USB-C dock.
Okay, I think I understand. But there's not like a splitter.
Not
There's
for
like a
VGA.
One thing I noticed, Nicole, was I took, like the monitor I got here with me now, I plugged into that through HDMI, but I was also able to use, I want to say my iPad or like another, or AirDrop to another screen. So that was a way to be able to use 3 screens. So you can do AirPlay to one of your other devices, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm finding there are like dual HDMI ones, but there aren't any dual VGA ones. VGA is definitely on the way out. And so I think that's why you can't find any dual VGA ones.
Okay. All right. And yeah, Larry, I am able to use my iPad, but for some reason, even if I plug it in, it's just still going out. So I probably just gotta take it to get looked at.
Okay.
Christy, you want to share your screen? I did not forget about you.
I thought I'm not. Oh, wait a minute. I thought I was share screen. Okay, so here it is.
Okay.
You can see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so here this is.
Yep.
Do I drag it here?
No, you drag it to the center area. Yep, right there.
Now, I was having trouble with this.
Okay, so yep.
Oh, wait, right, of course. Yeah, okay. That's crazy. Do you know how long I played around with that? Oh my God. Okay.
My mom called me last night and said, I can't close the garage door from your car. And I said, you just push the button with our house number on it. She goes, I've been pushing it for 5 times and then I hear the garage door closing and she goes, I don't believe it. I've been pushing this button for 5 minutes and all it needed to do was hear your voice and all of a sudden the garage door is closing.
I was gonna have a nervous breakdown the other day when you were doing this. I was like, I know I'm not crazy. And I could not, I was dragging it and it was all over the place. And then other boxes were popping up. I was like, what is going on? Because you did it so easily. I was like, this is too much.
Can we go back to that statement of, we know you're not crazy? Have we verified that?
My mother had me tested.
Just kidding.
I got that from Sheldon. Let me see. So, okay, so wait a minute. So now, this is my next question. How do I save this so that when I'm alone, I can, because I remember all the stuff that you did, but so this will be, like if
So what I would recommend is right click on page 1 down at the bottom and say duplicate.
Mm-hmm.
And then rename that one as like grid template.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
that's it.
And now whenever you want a new starting page, you can just duplicate that grid template and that will be your starting point.
In here.
Yeah.
So if I close out of this and then open it back up, let me see, let me do that. I'm gonna close out of it. Now here we are. So start right here.
And then if you hit, I think, change storage and pick
Google Drive or device.
device, open existing, that should have, yeah, try that. No, I'm surprised it didn't give you a save option. All right, let's do this. Hit cancel, do create new. We're gonna recreate yours really quickly. What we should do is if you hit create on that, that's where you want to save it. And then that way you'll be able to reopen it in the future.
How do I get it here?
So if you hit the little arrow next to where, that will give you a full browser, and then you can save it on your desktop or do your downloads or wherever you want.
Say, what am I, wait, save what?
You're saving a blank file, but when you continue to make edits to it, you'll be able to save into that file.
Oh, so just save that.
Yeah.
And then, now where's the thing that I,
We lost that one.
oh, so now I gotta do it again. So now
Yep.
I have to do the rectangle. And make it. I'm glad I asked this question. Well, I want it to be 960 and 9 something. No, I wrote it down. What was it?
600.
960 and 600. Okay. Why isn't it?
You can also just use your numbers over here.
When I tried to do that too, now watch, it's gonna do it now because you're here. I tried to type in the numbers the other day and I couldn't do that either. So
You can type,
yeah,
you can type for size, but you can't change position with the numbers.
I couldn't do the size the other day. That's that. This
Weird.
is this is what do you call this? Maxisms? Is that what it's called?
Max syndrome. Maxisms is a sage word of advice. The Max syndrome is when shit works when I'm around.
Oh, so then for this is supposed to be 1265, right?
No, you can leave that where it is. The position doesn't actually matter.
All
I
right,
have a quick question whenever.
Yeah.
you go ahead. I'm gonna try this, do this by myself and see what happens.
So when I look in the table section, right where you have 428, 7:45 p.m.
Yep.
You have a page break there. Then you have
A line break, not a page break.
yeah, line break, and then you have like a I don't even know, closing tag with like 15 responses next to it. Well, why you have that?
So so this is a self-closing tag, right? Meaning that it is both an opening tag and a closing tag because it has the slash built into it. So this is all in my TD tag. But if I wanted my 15 responses to go on to the next line, right? I've got 15 responses down here. If I
Right.
take out that BR and just put a space in between,
It's just gonna be on the one line.
correct.
Uh-huh.
And so the BR is just a line break to say, hey, treat this as like I'm hitting the enter button in my HTML.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
trying to think of, we've touched on a couple of other self-closing tags, probably not a ton of them. But whenever you have that slash in the tag, it's treated as an opening and closing tag.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
As I was like, okay, all right. Then
Stick around for 4 more minutes if anyone has questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna jump out of here. As you guys get your planning docs together, feel free to share with me in Slack, and I'm happy to provide feedback on that. You know, one-on-ones are fine. If you want to do it more asynchronously, you want to do it over email, whatever you want to do, that's completely fine. But feel free to share your progress as you're going on it. And I will also say at stand up, if you're super proud of something on your capstone and you feel like you're making progress, we can always find 2 or 3 minutes in stand up to do a quick screen share and show how you're making out.
No, have a good night. Thank you. I'm out of here.
Oh, in the beginning of the class. Bye, Max.
Feel free to pack up and head out. I'll stick around if any more questions pop up, but you guys are welcome to get out of here. I think Caitlin's already ripped the HDMI cord out. She's like, I am out.
Have a good night, guys.
have a good night.
All right, I'll see you guys.
Have a good night, y'all.